what I'm going to do for the next half an hour or so is hopefully take you on a little trip into the future of the world of work. And we're going to have a little look at the world of work itself, how it's impacted by things that are changing in society and things that are changing with us, and how engagement is a workplace approach essentially that will take us through those shifts that are happening, and how it's actually connected to mediation and the redefining of the resolution process that we're talking about today. So I'll make those connections hopefully, and you can see how an engaging culture will actually influence those changes in policy that we want to see. But first of all, what am I pressing on here? That one? Yes. Think about the world. Think about the world that we know at the moment and where we want to be in the future. At the moment, if you think about work and you think about, Friday, we all celebrate Friday. We love Fridays. Fridays are great. Fridays are the weekend because we don't have to work. And where I would like to be, and I'm very lucky because actually most of the time I live in this world, is actually Monday morning. Oh, I love Monday mornings. Even if I've got to get on the M6, even if I've got to get up at 5:30 and get on a train. And that's because I genuinely love what I do. And I'm conscious that I'm very lucky in that. When we look at figures for engagement really across the Western Hemisphere and the economies that we have there, we get very consistent figures of the levels of engagement within organisations. And generally, about a third of you, this sort of half of the room here, you're with me. We're like SpongeBob on a movie. We're like, I'm ready. Monday mornings are fantastic. Yay, let's go. You lot in the middle, you're like, yeah, it works okay. I get to meet my mates and we do some stuff and it pays the mortgage and it's all right most of the time. You lot over here, you think I'm absolutely bonkers already. You're like, work is hell. No, I can't wait for Friday. And I hate Monday, and Monday is a trauma. And those figures, a third and a third and a third, really are reflected in all of the research that is done by Gallup, the Hay Groups of the world, Connexus, Towers Watson, all of that sort of thing. And the concerning thing is that even though generally we do understand engagement now, and most people will nod and say, yeah, absolutely, we should have some of that in our organisation, it's not changing those figures. They are still remaining at that sort of level, where really 2/3 of the workforce are not enjoying the majority of their day because they're at work and they're not engaged with their organisation or the tasks that they do. And that is really concerning when you consider the impact that it has on people's health, on their ability to live the rest of their lives. I mean, I have no truck with the phrase work-life balance. It's all life. Bits of it are work, bits of it are life, whatever. But there's balance implies a tension, and it shouldn't be. It's all one thing that we need to integrate particularly into where we're going. And this is particularly relevant these days because we are absolutely in the middle of a paradigm shift in how work itself works. And there are loads and loads of factors that are impacting on that. And these are just some of them here. And one of the main factors is actually us as people operating in society. And we no longer, for instance, trust bosses simply because they're a boss. Absolutely, we used to. If somebody was in a position of authority, we gave them deference, we gave them respect because they were in that leadership position. These days, and increasingly as the generations come up underneath us, we expect people to earn that trust and respect. We are far less deferent. We trust far less easily. And because we've been let down by people in authority, journalists, politicians, doctors to a degree, again, all professions that used to generate a real amount of respect and deference. Again, we expect that to be earned, and we're more cynical and we've been let down. So we expect far greater feedback now than we used to have before we will give our trust and respect in a work situation. Technology has obviously made huge impacts into the way that we work already, and is just increasing in pace. I mean, 4 or 5 years ago, if I was doing a talk like this, I'd have started immediately by saying, now we'll make sure your mobile phones are off and blah, 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 blah. These days, the access to technology is so key to the way that we work and the way that we think, that I think nothing of the fact that people are tweeting, they're looking up some reference to something that I've made. It's really changed the way that we think about how we interact in a learning situation. And that's influencing our organisations that we work in as well. So my corporate history, I spent a long time, 20 years or so, working for BT, British Telecom. When I first started there back in 1992, knowledge was your power within the organisation. It was your currency, it was your status, it certainly defined your pay, the knowledge and experience that you had, and it probably defined any form of promotion and career path that you took as well. And there was no incentive whatsoever for you to share that knowledge. And in fact, quite the opposite. You guarded that knowledge because it was your currency and your status within the organisation. You held it close and you did not share, you did not mentor, you were territorial about it, you didn't want other people learning it. Technology has bust a hole completely in that. Now, these days, with obviously the gadgets that we all have to hand, access to that knowledge, if not the experience, is so much more easy, it's so much more equal. People can just go out and get that knowledge. And so your strength within an organisation actually becomes quite different. It becomes your ability to synthesise the knowledge with your experience and share that. It becomes completely the opposite. And your ability to mentor people, to bring young people along, to transfer that knowledge back into the organisation is huge. And that is a fundamental technologically driven shift in how we operate within organisations. Work itself is changing, the nature of the work that we do. We've obviously seen this over a number of years in the UK, moving away from manufacturing economies, moving far more into service-based work. If any of you read Daniel Pink, I suspect I'm in a room where a number of people will, then 75% of jobs, according to him, are now knowledge-based and discretionary, as opposed to being far more manually centred. And that, again, changes how we make that work in a workplace, and how we lead that work and how we manage that work and how we take part in it as simply as employees, as part of our workforce. We are more demanding as customers, and again, this is just simply us as people. We really expect now to be heard. I'm an inveterate Twitterer. I'll give you my Twitter account in a bit if you do the same thing. And but I expect now that I've got a route. So if British Gas have annoyed me because my radiators are leaking, which currently they are, I can go on and I can tweet, and I will be really annoyed about the fact that the installation that I've received from British Gas is rubbish. And that will go to my 3,500 followers, which is fine. But it will then go, when my friend at Shrewsbury Morris picks it up with his 60,000 followers, to possibly potentially 1 million people. And British Gas, let me tell you, will be straight onto me going, how can we help? What can we do? What could we have done better? How do we fix this for you? So we are really geared towards having our voice acknowledged far more than we ever used to. And reviews do this for us as well. The culture that we have around Amazon and eBay and giving instant feedback is again driving a difference in behaviour to us as customers. We expect to be heard, and we expect to be acknowledged, and we expect to be answered. And this, again, I mean, from my corporate experience, when I first joined BT in '92, I joined 150 sales and billing. If you were moving house or if you got a problem with your bill, it was the number that you called. And at that point, BT was quoting 6 weeks to install a brand new telephone line from scratch. I was there in that department for about 5 years. By the time I left, that was down to 3 working days in the vast majority of cases, driven by technological change and customer demand. 6 weeks was too long to wait for installation of a new telephone line. When the founder of Engage4Success, David McLeod, does this type of talk to people, he always talks about his experience as the brand manager in Dulux. And he says, yellow paint card. The yellow paint card was one shade of yellow because yellow pigment was really expensive. It was difficult to produce on any great scale. And therefore, you were lucky to have one yellow. You know, put up with it. That's what you've got. And again, through technological change and customer demand, the yellow paint cards are exactly the same as all of the other paint cards. There's now 50 million shades of yellow. And that is driven by customer demand. We expect to be heard. Competition has obviously been changing things for a while with us. We talk about the tiger economies. Again, we are only going to see that ramp up. It's going to be huge. And sustainability as well is actually becoming a focus. And some of these things we might see as quite negative changes. But I think the increasing drive towards more responsible business can only actually be a good thing. Now, all of this creates tension in that paradigm shift, and we are in that now. This isn't coming down the road, we're in it, it's happening around us now and has been for some time. And this is where it impacts structures within both our society and our organisations that we have to start rethinking because they no longer work for the way that work works and our organisations need to operate. And in the wider sort of society structure, that's things like taxation. Taxation, particularly in this country, is a complete mess when we think about how our working patterns are changing. It doesn't work for sole traders, it doesn't work for people with portfolio careers, it doesn't work for the fact that we are going to continue working for a lot longer than most of us would ever have imagined when we joined the workforce. Education doesn't work. We're not teaching our children the right things. The pace of change is going to accelerate to such a degree that actually the best thing that we can be teaching our children is how to learn. And instead, our education system is based on completely outdated modes of learning and skill sets that are just going to be completely useless to them. They are not going to prepare our children for the world of work that they are going to enter in 5 to 10 years' time. And in 5 to 10 years' time, 50% of the jobs that those children will be doing do not even exist now. So how can we plan skills that they might need for jobs that we don't even know are going to be there? And this is why teaching them to be flexible, to be resilient, to be adaptive is actually what we should be doing. So that's the sort of society view, is that these pillars that keep us going are not functioning. But within an organisation, it absolutely comes down to things like our grievance procedures. These no longer work in the environment that we are working in and will become increasingly less effective. And performance management is another one, recruitment is another one. These are all going to have to be completely rethought and re-engineered to actually be appropriate for the way in which businesses are going to be able to go forward as we go on with this change that's happening. And for me, engagement is the way that we navigate through this sort of maelstrom of change that is happening. If we have employees that come together as a whole with commitment to the organisation, with enjoyment of what they do, with a sense of meaning and purpose, because we're treating them as adults in any of those policies and procedures that we have, is what will make our organisation successful. It makes us far more healthy and committed to work and to life. So as individuals, we benefit. And of course, we then benefit from the healthier economies and societies that we live and work in through having those thriving organisations and thriving people within them. So this is all here. This actually isn't the future. This change is happening now. And unless we think about some of these things, they're just going to overwhelm us and we're not going to be able to deal with them. Another technological change that's going to have an impact is the increasing transparency into the heart of our organisations. So who's heard of Glassdoor? A few of you. Increasingly, every time I ask that question, we get a few more hands going up. Glassdoor is the TripAdvisor of workplaces, if you like. So you, as an individual employee, can go on, find your organisation, you can enter your organisation if it's not already there, and you can put your unbiased view of what it is like to work for that organisation and what you think of the leader, the CEO of that organisation, as appropriate. They do quite a lot of vetting and various algorithms and whatever else to try and make sure that obviously what is going up there is balanced and is not employees with grievances or disgruntled employees or anything else, so that you're getting a reasonably good view. And of course, companies can interact with it now as well. So they can't go on and remove anybody's reviews, but they can go on and start to work with what their employees are telling them in order to obviously make a better environment. And increasingly, people are looking at this. I mean, they're probably well up to 2 million hits a month now. And this will become so important. I mean, we talk about a war for talent now. The demographic of the generation, again, the millennials and the one below them coming up, is so small that they are going to have their pick of jobs. People entering the workplace, it's just going to shrink and shrink and shrink over the next 5 years. They're going to have their choice. And that puts things like engagement and how you foster engagement with good human-centric policies far closer to the start of the chain than it ever does. I mean, we think about engagement now as being something that happens when somebody joins an organisation. You're going to need to be thinking about how you engage people who are merely thinking about working for your organisation. Because when they can go on to something like this and have a look at the unbiased view of people who already work there, you need to address that, and you need to make sure that people are looking at it going, well, do you know, actually, I can see myself being committed to what that company stands for, and I can see myself bringing my whole self to that job and enjoying it and wanting to stay there and make that company successful. So it starts far earlier, and the transparency from things like Glassdoor, Career Bliss, there are a number of sites now that do something similar, again, is only going to increase. That demographic piece again, 5 generations in the workplace, we now have this. It's the biggest gap between the start and the end of the workforce that we've had since we used to put Victorian children up chimneys. This is a part of my lovely family, bless them. This hairy monster in the middle is my 17-year-old, obviously trying to hide from a camera. He's in the middle of his A-levels, which is scary enough, and he's applying for engineering apprenticeships. He's old enough now to be in an apprenticeship. He could be in the workforce. He could have been in the workforce from last year. As a mother, I cannot tell you how scary I find that. This lovely, distinguished grey-haired chap at the back is my stepfather, John. He's 74. John still works. John is a self-employed plasterer. He left school at 14. And John works for 2 reasons. Because of the age that he is and the generation he is, he's got absolutely sod all pension. So in order to carry on playing golf and do the things that he wants to do, he still works. But the primary reason that he works is because he is a master craftsman who has been plastering since he was 14. And it is absolutely a part of his identity. And the day that he can no longer do that will be a sad day in our household, because it is very much bound up in his view of himself. And because we're living longer, healthier lives, we are going to, this will not be unusual. Working until 74, 75, 76 is not going to be unusual in any way, shape or form. I mean, I would suggest in the next 5 years or so, we're going to see the removal of any form of mandatory retirement age. That will come out. And, you know, we will really be looking at a different way of operating a working career. I mean, we're already well away from the sort of job for life type approach that was certainly prevalent when I entered the workforce in 92. 88, but you know, this whole concept now of doing different things, perhaps learning a skill that you then apply across maybe 10 different companies at the same time, is now becoming more prevalent. People who do perhaps a normal corporate job for 3 days of the week and then go off and do yoga training or whatever else it is that they want to do. So we're far more likely to do something quite different with our careers, have a very different career pattern over our working life. And obviously increasingly at that older end, people who are, you know, my parents generally did retire at 60 and 62, but they were still incredibly active, focused, wanting to do some form of work, and both of them got involved in volunteer work very heavily because it fitted a need for them, their activity. They did not consider themselves to be retired in any sense of the word. And of course, the fact that we do that is going to have impact, again, on those society pillars that we rely on, like pensions and everything else. So all of this has to be rethought as we progress down this route. We also know so much more about how the brain works, and this impacts our working cultures hugely. We understand far more now about motivation and about how we respond to things like grievance procedures and performance management and mediation. And it really should start to inform how we create the cultures that prevent us needing anything like those policies. I mean, that's the ideal, really. How do we not have to use a mediation process? That would be brilliant. But the fact that we now understand how we respond to conflict and that type of thing puts us in a much stronger position to be able to create those far more human-centric policies and practices and processes within an organisation. And of course, we're not alone in the world anymore. I'm a bit of a science fiction geek, I'm afraid, but we have cybernetics, you know, biotechnology, nanotechnology, robotics, artificial intelligence, and that's actually, it's not science fiction. All of those things are here now. They really, really are. And again, when you start to think about what implication that has for how we work, how do you manage a team meeting and the relationships of a team when half of them are robots, half of them are AI, and some more of them are actual people? You know, again, unless we start to think about the reality of that, it's going to be here. And then we won't be able to deal with it. And then we will need things like mediation, because people will be going, my job's disappeared. Well, you know, you've constructively dismissed me because you bought in a robot. But automation is going to be fascinating over the next 5 years or so. We're going to see jobs automated that at the moment we have no concept that they could be done. A classic one that will happen very soon is the diagnostic element of being a doctor. We've already demonstrated that that can be done far more effectively by an artificial intelligence. And of course, what that leaves in terms of what's left for us is the human part of, in that example, being a doctor. The caring, the empathy, the bit that actually helps you get well once it's understood what it is that is wrong with you. So fascinating changes there as well that will have an impact for all of this. So what actually, when we talk about engagement, what is it? This is a picture of me and two of my team. Engage4Success is a very small organisation. I'm the only employee. We work largely on seconded and volunteer resource, which obviously has its own challenges in terms of engagement. But we generally do honestly always look like this because we love what we do. I mean, we're very lucky, we're highly engaged, we're a very high performing team, and we have great fun in our working days. But I think, you know, we've all, I've certainly in a career of 25 years, been in places where that's not been the case. Where we've had a particularly appalling line manager, for instance, which can have one of the most detrimental effects on how we deal at work. Or particularly stressful changes going on that haven't been communicated very well or are not being handled well within an organisation. And that's those pinch points where grievance procedures, mediation, all of those things come together, because engagement allows us to have the grown-up conversation that says, I'm not okay about this, and be heard and actually be acknowledged and have something done about it, rather than the sort of screaming into the wind and nothing happening, and then you feeling increasingly stressed as an employee. This is not engagement. Often very easier to define it by what it isn't. That's a council employee in Swindon who was so pissed off with his job that he could not be asked to stop the paint truck and get out and move that branch. And it's a real example. Swindon Council, it cost them a lot of money, both in terms of repainting the road, but also, of course, this picture went viral. And in terms of reputational damage to them, it was huge. But, you know, that's the result. That's what disengagement does within an organisation. It's also not this. I mean, this is a shot from Metropolis, one of the first science fiction films, probably the first ever made. And these people are enthralled to a machine. Absolutely, they are productive, which is a buzzword very much around at the moment. But they're productive because they really have no choice. And they are marching in and they're marching out and everything is regimented. There's no creativity, there's no innovation there whatsoever at all. And so, although you might then have a degree of your organisation being reasonably efficient, you're missing out on all of the benefits that can come from having a workforce that is giving of itself in a voluntary way. This is also not engagement. These people are obviously manifestly pulling together, but they are because they have no choice. Sooner or later, if you're operating in a command and control way like this, or ruling by fear, which is a very outdated method, really, of managing your organisation, these people are going to burn out, they're going to rebel, something will happen. Again, no creativity, no innovation. So I'm going to give you 4 characteristics that operate in organisations that are getting this type of thing right. And when they are getting this type of thing right, a whole load of things will flow from it. For instance, far lower levels of absenteeism, far greater levels of retention, so far less churn within an organisation. Also direct impact on the bottom line, profit and revenue, and things like call centres find that they are far more efficient, they have far less downtime. So there are a whole raft of evidenced figures that if these things are in place and are working well within an organisational culture, there will be happening. And we do, again, with relevance today, also notice that there will be fewer grievances, fewer requirements for mediation because things have not progressed to that stage. And the first one is the story of the organisation. I mean, we call it strategic narrative, but don't get too hung up on the wording because you will find these concepts in every organisation. So this is about the vision of the organisation, where it's going, but it's also very much about its history. It's about where it's been. A story, it is a narrative over time. And so it's the understanding of where that organisation has been, where it's going to, where it is now, and also how you connect to that, quite emotionally. I mean, engagement is at heart an emotional concept. It's about how you feel. And this isn't the CEO on a video once a year saying, rah, 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 this is where we're going. It's not the leaflet that you file away and read once if you're lucky and then never look at again. It is genuinely the living, breathing story of the organisation. And one of the quickest ways to create disengagement is to ignore parts of that history. If you come in as a new leader, for instance, and we call it chiselling the hieroglyphs off the pyramid. So not effective. And just to give again a BT example, we used to have an internal strapline that we used, which was, it's good to talk. And I connected with that as an employee, even from the depths of the IT organisation where I was doing mainframe capacity planning at the time. That meant something to me. I could translate that into my purpose for being there and what I was delivering. When that changed with the change of management to let's roll out super fast broadband, strangely enough, you lose emotional connection. So that's the point about that strategic narrative. We need engaging managers who understand that management actually is a skill. It's not natural. We need to teach it to people. We forget that that's the case. And engaging managers generally do three things. They're able to focus people and give them scope on the task in hand, and then they back away and leave them to it. Micromanagement is probably one of the biggest causes of invoking a grievance procedure ever, I would think, just from personal experience. They treat people as individuals. I can't emphasise how important this is, not treating people en masse as a group, but actually clocking them individually. And being able to coach and stretch their people. And that means addressing dysfunctional behaviour. Dysfunctional behaviour needs to be addressed quickly and constructively. And again, we forget that that's a skill that people don't necessarily have. Employee voice, hugely important. And for me, I think one of the biggest preventative elements of the grievance procedures and mediation and everything else, if you've got employee voice right and healthy and people trust that there is a space where they can talk, then hopefully that's starting to put that preventative element in place for you. And surveys are an example of this, healthy union relationships are an example of this, but it is about trust and about a two-way approach. It's not the organisation communicating to the employees, it's far more holistic than that. And then organisational integrity, which is entirely about trust. This is, if you've got values on the wall for your organisation, that reflects the behaviour that is seen around you all the time. So you're not saying, our people are our greatest assets, but then everybody knows that there's a huge culture of bullying and harassment. So actually having that consistency and congruence between what you're saying and what the behaviour is that everybody sees around you. So Engage4Success, what do? We are the UK's national movement for employee engagement. All of our material is free to access. This is our new website that you can see here. Strongly encourage you to go and have a look. There are case studies, there's research, there's hints and tips about how to look at your culture and how to make it more engaging. We have networking groups where regionally based or topic specific that you can come and talk to people about. So always grateful for anybody who wants to get involved, whether that's actually interacting with us, coming to an event, whatever else it is, or whether it's simply taking some of the material and going to make a change in your organisation. What are we doing? We're doing some new work on what stops us engaging more effectively. So there's some work kicked off on the barriers to engagement at the moment. We have new thought and action groups, which is where our more active supporters get involved. Engage or Bust, our conference in November, kicked off a new era of events for us. So there will be a lot more Engage4Success events over the next few months. We have some wicked thinkers. They're people thinking really out there, 15, 20 years in terms of what's happening with the future of work and how that impacts everything that we're talking about today, engagement, culture, policy, all of those pieces. And we have a real focus on the practical. So we want people to be able to take our stuff and go and make a difference. Really, really important. So that's where you find us, engage4success.org, Engage4Success on Twitter. If you email us at info@, that will get us. And if you want to email me, I'm Cathy, C-A-T-H-Y, at engage4success.org. Always happy to talk to people. A number of our publications are there. The evidence for employee engagement, very handy if you need to convince people. The connection between well-being and engagement, a really good one as well. And this one's me, just in case you do want to come and find me. I always warn people, if you follow me on Twitter, I don't just tweet engagement, I tweet Morris dancing, cake and trains. So that's just a warning. But please, I do encourage you, particularly with Engage4Success, go and have a look, see what we've got there for you to download and get involved. And just to finish off, self-awareness is a really important thing for engagement as leaders, but also just as people who work with other people. Engagement can start with us and the way that we simply interact with the people that we see every day. And it's worth just thinking to yourself, actually, what does a perfect day look like for me? And for me, it's a leader and it's colleagues that I can trust. And again, we come back to prevention there of stopping bad things happening because you are working in an environment where you know that people have got your back. I like a view of my organisation's journey that I can believe in and that I know that it sits with me emotionally. I feel purpose, I feel meaning. The knowledge that I can have fun at work. I have great fun at work and I am conscious that I'm very lucky in that, but why shouldn't I? Where's a taboo that says we can't have fun at work, you know? But I also know that when we need to, my team and I can really pull together and we can make things happen at very, very short notice, with speed and with enjoyment, because we're up against it and we've got stuff to do, and because we all know our strengths and our weaknesses and what it is that we're aiming at, and that we've got each other's backs. So important for me. Opportunities for growth and development, that's one that's really high up my list. It isn't necessarily for other people, so this is a very individual list. This is what makes my day good. And knowing that my voice is heard, is needed and is valued. And again, I think that links us right back round to today's purpose. And just to finish off, my perfect day actually looks like that. That's the bridge of the Star Trek Enterprise. They've just come off the holodeck, which is why they're all in pirate costumes. They were having fun. They were doing something that was relaxing them. They were having fun as a team. An emergency situation has come up. And you might say that this is very command and control. I mean, Jean-Luc is giving orders there. But the environment that they work in means that those people have been able to input everything, all of their skill, all of their expertise to that situation. And when Jean-Luc issues that order, they absolutely trust him implicitly. And they know that they've been heard in every decision-making process that went on to the point of him making that decision and giving that order. And I tell you what, I bet nobody raises a grievance against Jean-Luc. So I'm done. I'm standing between you and coffee. I would suggest that if anybody has got any questions, that I'm around, obviously until lunchtime. We'll do that and we'll stay more or less on time. So thank you very much.